This is the Creative Market Free Goods Roundup for the week of February 8th, 2016. So there's 6 different free goods this week, but they are free this week only. So if you see something you like when you check out this video, check out the description below this video where you'll find links to download each one of these 6 different free items. So first up, we have Styled Stock White Frame Mockup. So this mockup includes both a JPEG photo and then a Photoshop document, which is what I have opened up right here. And as you can see, it's a very minimalist mockup overall with a white frame and then a vase with some plants inside of it. And if I go to image size here, just check the overall size of this. This is 5200 pixels wide by almost 3500 high. So that's going to be plenty big for most digital applications where you'll have this shown, which I think will be the primary use for most people. But it should also print out quite nicely at smaller sizes. So when you open up the Photoshop file, it doesn't automatically, for example, mask out your image to fit with this box, because where it says image layer in your layers palette, which is under window and then layers sort of near the middle, if I turn that on and off, it just turns that gray box right here inside the frame on and off. But it's super easy to make a folder that will be masked out, so anything you put inside that folder will automatically sit inside the frame right here. So to do that, just create a folder at the bottom of your layers palette. Looks like a folder icon, so click that. So now you have a folder. You could even name that something like image so you know what that folder is for. And then the important thing is you hold down Control or Command on a Mac and just click once the layer named image layer, which will select the outside border of that. And then you can go ahead and just click the eyeball next to that layer to hide it. You don't actually need that layer to be on, but as you can see, the selection is still active. So then click on the folder that you created previously. And if you go right down to the bottom of your layers window, there's an icon that looks like a rectangle with a circle right in the middle of it, that when you hover over it, it says add a layer mask. Just click that once to create a mask in this folder. So now I have this image that I dragged into this document previously. I think it's from a website called Unsplash, and I think it was originally taken by NASA. Whoops, I just moved my folder around. But if I move this around, you can see the image that I'm talking about. Just drag and drop your items that you want masked into the frame, into the folder that you created. And as you can see, it automatically masks out the item that you place inside of it right here. So make sure that you're selecting the item inside and not the folder, unless you want to mess things up a little bit. But if you select the item inside and move that around, you can then position it however you see fit, and it will automatically be masked in this frame. And it's super easy to do that. So I think that's something worth doing if you intend to mock a lot of things up with this particular mockup. And you can, of course, resize your item to better fit inside the frame so that in the end, it fits very nicely inside what you're trying to create inside this little frame right here. But that's it for this mock-up set. I think it's very well done. The photography is very nice. I'll zoom into 100% real quick here so you can see that the sharpness of the image is excellent. This looks really good up close, which is always a good sign of a nicely photographed item. But if you think you'll find this frame mock-up useful and you're looking to show some stuff off online, then be sure to pick this pack up this week while it's still free. Next up is Floral Bunch. This is a collection of very bright floral themed elements, and they're included in EPS format, which I have them all opened up inside Illustrator right now, as well as JPEG or PNG if you prefer to work that way. But I think the EPS ones will be the easiest to show for the purposes of this video. So here's the first one, and something you'll note right away about these items are that they're very bright and colorful. They're super fun to look at, and that carries across all the different examples in this particular set, and there are a lot of examples. So I'm going to be covering over everything fairly quickly here, but do pay attention to just how good the illustration quality is and how consistent the illustration quality is, because all the different elements inside these different arrangements do look like they were drawn by the same person. They have a very similar visual vibe to them, which I actually really enjoy. The set overall is super high quality, so do pay attention to the details. So here's the second one, and this is a really great example of what I was talking about. All the floral items in the outside parts of this particular illustration look very harmonious in the way they are executed, and then the type in the center is also very thoughtfully done because it works perfectly with the flowers around it, and the type is outlined so you can't go in here and change this around. But if I zoom in a bit closer on that type, you can tell it's heavily customized. It's probably a hand-drawn font with a lot of work done on the inside parts of many of these to make them extremely unique. So I think that's a really nice thing about this particular part of this set, because everything was so thoughtfully composed. But you can, of course, just select a type and bring that off to the side and use just that on a project if you want to, or bring in your own custom type or image into the center of this particular arrangement. So here's the next one with the word love in the middle. Once again, the type works fantastically with the different illustrations around it, and also the color palette on this particular example is super superb in my opinion. Like I said before, across all these, the color palettes are super strong. So even if you're not into floral based designs, if that's not your thing and not something you'll have a whole lot of use for, do pay attention to the color choices this person used, because I think they're extremely strong overall. And if you're looking for a very fun and bright color palette, you can use these items just to grab some really awesome color combinations from. So here's the next one. It's very similar to the one previously, except this one has a much more portrait orientation as opposed to a square like the one previously. But once again, the type works great with these images, and all the images are extremely well rendered. And this one right here just has the word love in it. And with Valentine's Day coming up soon, if you wanted to make a custom card, this would be an awesome thing to stick right on the front. As you can tell, everything in this works perfectly well together, all the colors, all the imagery, and the font choice. So super well done on this one. And this one is actually a seamlessly repeating pattern. So what's inside the black box right here is the original part of the illustration. And then I went ahead and repeated that so you can see how it looks as it's brought into a bigger design. So creating seamless repeats that don't look like a repeat can be a very difficult thing to pull off, because certain things will stand out as a repeated element, and sometimes it can look very almost machine generated when you do that. But because everything in this is so organic and so natural, I'm just going to move this off to the side here so you can see that without the black box. As you can see here, this looks like a very natural arrangement of things, and the fact that it's a seamless pattern doesn't seem to stand out too much, and that is a really good sign of a well done repeating pattern. So on this one right here, we have a nice framed element in the middle with some custom type that you could of course ungroup, and then grab just that type. If I ungroup this enough times here, remove that and put your own custom type in the center here. You could of course remove these flower elements or use them on a different project if you wanted to, or of course delete this thing entirely, and then you have, I believe it's the same thing as the floral pattern previously, which seeing the previous slide, it is indeed that. So feel free to use this one however you see fit, but it does have a very nice framed element here in the middle for you to add your own custom stuff in. And this is the last one, which is the same frame as the one previously, but with a different floral arrangement behind it. And this floral arrangement behind it is the same floral pattern as the very first part of the item that we looked at previously. If you look at this first one right here, you can see that direct comparison. But overall, a super well done pack of floral elements, very strong type choices, very strong color choices, and an illustration style that works really well with everything included in this set. So super cool one in my book. If you're a fan of flowery illustrations, then this one is a must pick up in my opinion. But even if not, feel free to use this for the color palette, which is overall just a very thoughtful group of choices that works extremely well together. So if you like this and you think you'll get some use out of it, just be sure to grab this pack this week while it's still free. Next up is Other Basic, which is a Tumblr theme. This is a theme for Tumblr, and if you're not too familiar with what Tumblr is, it's basically a blog or post-driven content management system that's very easy to upload things like videos or photos or blocks of type. Pretty much anything you can think of, Tumblr will probably handle. And something cool with Tumblr in particular is that it has a very nice social sharing system. So there's a reblog feature, which allows other people to post your posts on their own blog while giving you credit. And it allows people to share stuff on Tumblr at a rate that is really hard to match through other social sharing methods, because very quickly a popular post can be reblogged on several different blogs and it will spread, and in return your content will get a whole lot of traffic, all while crediting your original website. So this theme is for Tumblr, and it's fairly simple by nature. As you can see as I scroll down here, it's just big images with a center one column layout, and it does respond, so it should look good on smaller devices as well. Off to the left side here, there is a menu that as soon as you hover over it, it brings up Archive, Twitter, or Facebook. And if you were viewing this on a mobile device, for example, that menu would always be at the very top as opposed to the side right here. But you can link off your Twitter or Facebook or add additional things as well if you have different social networking sites where you want people to go. If you end up clicking on the archive section, it just ends up breaking up your post by the month that it was posted. So it's a very nice way to quickly see all the different things that were posted by the particular page that you have this theme installed on with Tumblr. And I'll go back here once again and scroll down a little bit more and click on a given item, which as you can see, when you click on an item, it brings up that item on its own page. And in this case, it'll say share on Facebook or Twitter. So you can see there are sharing mechanisms, and then you do have the reblog and then the like, with this particular post having 241 likes. And I should note, you can write stuff under these too. For the most part, this is a pretty sparse example set in terms of the amount of type included. But right here on this particular one, if I click on this and it brings it up in its own window here, you can see there's a little bit of type below it and then a link to a website, so you can link other people off to different parts or websites as you see fit with any posts that you have. And although I don't see any video examples in this particular theme as far as examples go, I do know that Tumblr does natively handle stuff like video and audio, so I would assume that you can also do these sorts of things using this particular theme. But that's it for this one. It's very straightforward, one column layout that puts a really big focus on what you're posting. So if you're doing a visual blog of some sort where you're documenting a bunch of images or collecting images that you like, or even a snapshot of a portfolio kind of where you just want to have a vertical listing of all the images that you are perhaps working on, then this one might be a cool one for you to pick up. And like I said before, Tumblr is really cool because it is such a good social sharing content management system to use. It's one of the very best at getting stuff shared to a whole lot of people, so that is also something that's kind of a little bit of a bonus when using Tumblr. But that's it for this theme. If it looks like something you might have use for, just be sure to grab it this week. Next, we have black and white modern digital papers. This is a collection of 10 different digital paper patterns in JPEG format, so I have them all opened up inside Photoshop here to show. And I'll go to image size first to check out the size of these, which is 3600 by 3600 pixels. So it should be plenty big for most things that you want to use it on. And these are also seamlessly repeating patterns, which means you can tile them out to be as big as you need them to be. So I don't think size should be any sort of an issue, because if they're too small as they are, you can tile them out to make them as long or as wide as they need to be, depending on what you're trying to do. Or even if you want them to appear a bit smaller in a confined space, you could tile them up kind of like I did right here. So I tiled this just vertically, but if I go ahead and shrink this down quickly, you can see that if you want to make the pattern a little bit tighter, but you don't want to make your entire window a whole lot smaller, you can just very quickly tile these out, and then you'll have a pattern that fits the smaller scale that you're trying to achieve. So as you can see, it didn't take me too long to do that, and the end result looks like a perfect seamless pattern. And I actually did this completely unintentionally, but it appears that the second pattern is essentially exactly what I just did in the first one. So it's basically a quarter the size as far as the pattern scale goes as the first one. So that is what the second pattern is. So I'm actually switching between the two windows right here, so you can see that I just unintentionally recreated an item in the set, so go me on that one. And this is the third one, which is very similar to the one previously, just a much lighter shade for these crosses in the center here. I'll just zoom in a bit more. And here's the fourth one, once again, a much lighter overall pattern using these cross shapes right here. And I'll just go to the first one quick too and zoom back in a little bit closer. Actually, I'm just going to untile this so you can see these a bit bigger and see that these do have a really cool watercolory texture inside of them that I actually quite like, and gives these a very handmade appearance once you go in there and see that detail. So here's the fifth one, and this one is a polka dot pattern, and some really cool texturing going on in this one in particular. Instead of just using, for example, a black dot and a gray dot, they made a heavily textured dot that kind of serves the same thing as a gray dot would, but I think this is a lot more visually interesting than if it was a solid gray, because that texture really kind of sets this apart and makes this look very handmade. And this is at 100% by the way, and as you can tell, this is extremely sharp and clear as I zoom in this far. So here's the sixth one, very similar to the previous pattern, but in this case we're using triangles, and the triangles that are textured are not quite as textured as the circles in the one previously. This is the seventh one here, which is a bit more of a randomized pattern, but still it does kind of pull off a polka dot style effect, just a whole lot more abstract in its overall execution. Some really cool textures going on here with a lot of variation in the amount of texture between all these different elements. So this is a very unique pattern that I actually like quite a bit. Here is the eighth pattern, and this one is a bunch of vertical stripes. Once again, really nice texturing going on in the inside parts of these, and feel free to use these at whatever scale you think makes the most sense. You could make some abstract things out of this pattern if you just use cross sections of these different lines. So if you wanted to draw a shape, for example, right here, and just kind of use a cross section of that. I actually just did something I didn't intend to do, so I'm going to cancel that as I wanted to just delete this. So I'll unlock the background really quick and then just delete this. So you can make striped patterns using this if you want to use this little sections or make shapes out of that. Feel free to use these patterns however you see fit. And this is the ninth pattern. Once again, another triangular pattern. I'll zoom in to 100% right here, as you can see these up close, with the smaller triangles having a solid black fill and the slightly larger triangles having a much more textured appearance overall. So a pretty cool one right here. And here's the 10th one, which is a very basic polka dot pattern. I'll zoom in a little bit closer so you can see the texture inside of these. So not a significant texture, but there is definitely a little bit of texture going on inside of these dots. And of course, at any time, if you want to change the color of these, because the background is a stark white, it should be super easy to do that. Just hit Control U on a PC or Command U on a Mac to bring up hue saturation. Make sure this little colorize window is checked right here. And when the colorize window is checked, just bring up the lightness a little bit so you can bring in some color to these dots right here. You can kick up the saturation if you want to and adjust the hue until you get a color of dot that you think looks good. And you can also, of course, adjust the lightness to be as light or as dark as you want. Although once you go past a lightness of 0 into the negatives, it'll actually start adding color to the background as well, which if that's something you're looking for, that's cool. But if that happens and you didn't want it to, just keep that lightness in a positive percentage. But that's it for these 10 different digital papers. If you think these are cool and you have some uses for them in the future or perhaps on a project right now, just be sure to grab this pack this week. Next up is Awesome Darling, which is a font. So this font is provided in both OpenType as well as TrueType font formats, and I have it opened up inside Adobe Illustrator here to show it. And as you can tell, this is a script font with both lowercase and uppercase letter variations. So I'm going to zoom in on the lowercase letters first so you can get a good idea of how these look up close. So this has a very loose style that reminds me almost of an educational example of a script font, which I don't know if that makes complete sense, but if I go down here where you can kind of see this sort of very loose, very playful execution of the letters, I guess that's where I kind of think of a bit younger, or at least a bit more of a fun application of a script font than anything too serious. So I'll go back up to the lowercase letters here so you can see everything that's included. But as you can tell, these have a very playful execution with a whole lot of movement going on between all the different letters, especially when you check out something like the R to the S. The R has a lot of style to it, and just the way these interconnect is kind of an interesting relationship between those two letters. And the uppercase letters are a bit more simplified, so they're fairly standard as far as an uppercase letter goes. In a script font, they're almost like you would have a typical serif font look that had a very handwritten look, for example, but nothing too crazy out of the ordinary with those, with the exception of the J right here, which has a very unique look to it that's not quite typical with what you'd come to expect from a J. And when I go down here, that does include all the numbers 0 through 9, and then a whole bunch of different special characters, including some rather unexpected stuff. So I'm going to highlight this, go to type, and then glyphs so you can see everything that's included. So up at the top here, we have all the standard letters that you would come to expect. But as you get down here a little bit further, there's some more interesting things like these letters with little squiggly marks at the end, or this looks like a capital E with an arrow pointing off to the left. There's a bunch of different heart examples. For example, there's letters with hearts around them. So I'll just double click on this really quick if I can actually do that. And then after the G here, there looks like there's a letter C with a heart drawn around it. And it chose to stick that right in the middle here. But if I move that off to the side, you can see that it is the letter C with a little heart drawn around it. So there's a bunch of kind of quirky examples of letter forms just like that inside this set that you can choose to use if you're interested in that sort of a thing. So definitely check out the glyphs here. Once again, just go to type and then glyphs. And I'll just do that very quick on my screen. So type, and then near the top, glyphs, where you can check out everything that's included with the set. And it helps to find those glyphs if you just highlight a piece of text before you go ahead and do that. And here is Free Goods Roundup typed up into a sentence. You can see how that looks. As you can tell, the letters flow very nicely from letter to letter. There's no kerning issues, and the stock letter spacing looks pretty darn good as well. But that's it for this font. It's a pretty darn cool font with a lot of really unique special glyphs included in it as well, especially glyphs that I have not seen previously in other fonts at all. Some of these things are very unique to this particular font. So if you like this font, you like the style of this font, then I suggest you pick it up this week while it's still free. And last up is Cartoon Games GUI Pack 9. This pack is a graphical interface for a game and is provided in a bunch of different formats, including Illustrator, EPS, PDF, PNG, and then .cdr, which isn't a format I'm familiar with, but I'm pretty sure it's for Corel Draw. But if I'm wrong about that, feel free to correct me in the comment section. So by default, they separate all these things into 4 different pages, but I just went ahead and put them all on the same page right here, so it's a little bit easier for me to go through everything at once. So first up here, I'll zoom in on some of these elements so you can check these out, and I especially like the iconography that they created for this particular set. There's some really fun stuff here. All of it has a 3D sort of effect to it and bold, simple choices, both in terms of the shapes used and then the colors used as well. So overall, I think this is a really solid set of icons. And then you have a bunch of different bars here that can be shown to show things like time left or health or shield or energy. So when you're thinking about a mobile game in particular, these are things that will be kind of helpful to have ready to go if you want to just graphically lay something out and get going on it. Below that, we have some additional elements as well as buttons buttons right here. Some of these things, I'm not sure exactly how you'd want to go in and use them, but I see many of these things as a little tray for different buttons or elements to sit inside. Below that we have some additional elements such as these currency icons and then a bunch of on and off buttons that you can go ahead and use if you want to, as well as different radio and checkbox buttons right here as well. So off to the side here we have a bunch of different window options where you can present all the information or even have the game live inside if that's something you want to do. So I think if you're going to get use out of these particular things, you probably have a pretty good idea of how exactly you're going to go ahead and execute with those. And we also have a background that's included that you could use as a title screen, or even if you're not using this for the purpose of a game, it's just a really fun illustration with lots of color and bright, simple shapes in it that I actually quite like. So this is a fully vector element that you can go ahead and use however you see fit. And I think in the context of this particular item, it'd make a really awesome starting screen for your game. And off to the side here, we have a ton of different buttons to go ahead and use. So there's a few different colors to pick from. And then for all those different colors, there's elements for each one of them. So things like a home icon or information or different player counts, a trash can for removing stuff. So pretty much everything you'd come to expect as far as basic buttons go when you're going in and playing a mobile game. So I think you should be pretty well covered for most basic uses with the large set of included buttons that they have right here. But that's it for this set. Remember, this is the Illustrator format, but there are a bunch of different other formats as well. And just because this is for a game interface, you could go ahead and use these elements on other interfaces as well, or even just use some of the illustrations and really well done icons in some totally unexpected applications if you want to be a little bit more experimental in how you use this particular set. But that's it for this set. If you think this is cool and you'll have some use for it, just be sure to grab it this week while it's still free. So that's it for this week's free goods, and do remember they are free this week only. So if you saw something in this video you thought might be useful, be sure to check out the description below this video where you'll find a link to download it. And as always, if you found this video helpful, please like and favorite, and if you want to see this video every week, please subscribe. This video is released every Monday to let you know what's free this week on Creative Market. Thanks for watching.